So today's video is going to give you 10 ways that you can deal with tradesmen and find the best ones to make your deal. Now, one of the things I recognize is when you work in this industry, your tradesmen can really make or break your deal. You see, if you get the wrong person working on your project, then sadly, they're either going to overcharge you, they're either going to run away, or they're just going to do a shoddy job. And then that will sadly mean that your project is a failure. And the last thing I want from you guys is watching these videos to go out and find a tradesman and then for it to fail. So this video is going to give you 10 ways that I think are really going to help you. Aaron, roll that intro, please. Okay, so the first one is experience. Now, a lot of tradesmen will say that they can do pretty much everything. And I remember many times when I've asked tradesmen to do X, Y, and Z, and they've literally said, no problem. But then when it comes down to it, their actual execution wasn't that great. So what you want to really be looking at here is the standard of finish, the standard of quality, the workmanship. How tidy are their sites and how are they sticking to their timelines? So one of the things I'd always recommend, especially for newbies here, is to go and see some of their work. I would definitely do the following two things. I would look at a current job if possible, or I would go and speak to somebody that they've worked with previously, because that person then can give you the true picture. You see, often when you're working with people, it's very difficult to really know how good they are because you haven't finished the job. And initially, builders are always your best friends when you first start. But if you speak to somebody afterwards, you can really gauge whether the experience as a whole was worth your money. Number two, references. So kind of leading on from point number one, try and get references. Try and get references in terms of how quick were they? How much over the budget were they? What were they like in terms of timescales? Was there any complaints? Was there anything that you would have changed, for example? Now I know, as I've done this a few times, is using websites like mybuilder.com aren't always the greatest things to use. Now the reviews were fine. However, today I'm very skeptical, especially about reviews, because I see a lot of people in the industry, not just builders, who have so many reviews, and I know from knowing them and seeing their work that they're not that great. So you really want to actually speak to somebody and make sure it's not their friend. The third is contracts. You need a watertight contract. Now, JCT contracts are definitely something that you can use, but I also have templates as well that I initially started out with, where all you're doing is outlining your expectations. Now, within this contract, there's a few things that you need to be doing. You need to have the timeline set. You need to have the budget set, the contingency, and ideally, and this is one of the things that I'd really recommend, is write down exactly what you want in as much detail as possible. You see, one of the things that builders may do, and I'm not here to criticize builders because I have worked on that side, so I'm fully supportive of the work that they have to do, is to really be transparent in everything that you want. Because the last thing you want is when it comes to the end of the job and money is tight, that they turn around and say, well, that's not exactly how you asked for it. And they might do a cheaper fix just to make sure that they're not dipping into their own pockets. And also stick with stage payments as well. I always believe that some of the best builders should at least have some money in their bank to get the ball rolling. If they're asking you for 50% straight away, that should just ring a few alarm bells. Of course, if it's a huge deal and they need some materials and stuff, absolutely, go get those materials. And that's kind of one of the things I've started to do now. I normally negotiate and I say, I'll provide some of the starting materials, but in terms of the labor, I will pay you maybe after the first week or second week, and then it's a stage payment game. And you always want to hold some money back for the contingency at the end. Fourth, now this is me being on the side of a builder. So I did do some renovations for some clients previously as a project manager. And one of the things I'd say is that you really need to be realistic with your builders. I see people coming in and say, I want it to look like this, and their budget is like this. And I'm thinking, well, that's not gonna work. Or they want all of the work done and they want it done yesterday. And I'm just like, it's not going to happen. So you have to be realistic, because the more pressure you put on builders, then sadly, the more chances of them either struggling financially or just leaving the job. So be realistic. 5, project manage. So yes, as many of you know, I did do a 5-year degree in construction project management, which is actually quite handy. But project management, in my experience, is all about managing people in the right way, keeping them motivated, making sure you stick to the deadlines, and also ensuring that you don't have too much scope creep and you stay within the budget. Now, I've started project managing my refurbs now, but initially when I jumped into this game, I didn't have a clue. I'll be completely transparent. I wasn't really sure in terms of how I should renovate something, where I should be spending my money, or just really what to do. So as a result of that, I always asked if there was a project manager on site. Now for smaller renovations, it might not be necessary, but you really want to make sure that somebody's managing the different types of trades to make sure that they're coming in at the right time, they're doing the work that they say they're going to be doing, and just to make sure that the project is a success. However, if you're moving on to bigger projects, then please do not shy away from that 10%, 5%, or whatever they're charging as a project management fee and think you want to save yourself some money. You need a project manager. And I would offer to project manage, but I'm so busy making these videos for you guys, I simply don't have the time. Oh, and on that note, if you're finding this useful and you're looking forward to the next few, maybe consider giving this a like and subscribing to the channel, because you wouldn't understand how many mistakes I make on these videos and how long it actually takes to edit it. But I sincerely hope that it does help you, and if I missed anything at the end of the video, drop it down in the comments below. Moving on, document. Now this isn't necessarily linked to actually finding a tradesman, but it's going to help you find better tradesmen. So documenting is really important in the fact that simply when you make a mistake or you learn something from a tradesman, i.e. doing it this way may be slightly cheaper than doing it this way, or these materials are better here, or maybe not pay them so much up front, for example, or maybe be stricter with your times. I can go on. You want to document this. You want to at least document it, because our brains, as clever as we think we are, we forget things. And the more you document it, that almost gives you a kind of a list of lessons that you can then take forward for your next project. And every single project, if you're doing this, you're gonna get better. Trust me, I was literally the worst property investor in the world. In fact, I don't think there was anyone worse than me at property when we started this game. And now I'm doing okay. I'm not doing great, but I'm doing okay. So make sure you document. Okay, the next one is about preparation. And that is not just in terms of contingency for time and money, but also for your mind as well. Now you're probably thinking, how is this linked to finding a tradesman? It is. When you work with tradesmen, one of the things that you're gonna be doing is stressing. You're gonna be moaning to yourself. You're gonna be thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I'm putting myself through this. So you really need to plan and get your mind right for this particular point. Because I've had contractors not turning up. I've had leaks. I've had roofs fall down. I've had structural issues popping up. I've had damp creep up. I've had pipes bursting on me. I've had people breaking in. I've had so many different experiences whilst working on projects. And then when you're with tradesmen at this point as well, it's very difficult and overwhelming. So you really want to start to prepare that worst case scenario. What if something happens? And I'll just tell you very quickly about a new project that we've just taken on, which I'm going to do a video on. And it's about a project where we've spent a lot of money and it's miles and miles away. So if you're interested in learning about how to invest remotely, but also with cash purchases and really managing that offsite, then make sure you hit that subscribe button, because that video is coming out very soon. So anyway, back to the point, make sure you prepare as much as possible, because going back to that point, we've had people whose wives have given birth. We've had people who have fallen ill. We have had people who've had deaths in their family. We've had people who have caught COVID. So we've had all of these different things. And these aren't necessarily the things you're thinking about when you're writing your project out and you're working out the cost of all the materials and the labor, but you need to have a contingency for that. So you always want to just be making sure that everyone's fit, healthy, on time, but also that worst case scenario, there is somebody else that you can call in just to kind of fill those gaps. The next one's teamwork, one of my favorite ones, because teamwork, as I always say, makes the dream work. I might get that changed actually. So one of the things with teamwork is that you have to be willing to delegate. So if you are a leader, you do not want to be micromanaging people. You want to give people autonomy, but at the same time, you still want to be making sure that you are one, valuable to the team, but the team feels valuable to the team as well. So it's really important, especially with tradesmen, that you know that you want to work with them. You want to make them feel like that you're not just a client, that you're actually part of their team. And one of the things I've always tried to do with my tradesmen is let them know that, look, I invest in property full time. You guys help me out here. I promise you, I will help you out as much as possible moving forward. Because let's face it, it's a lot easier just sticking with the same guys than having to mix and match and change and build rapport with new people and understand how they work. In an ideal situation, I just want to work with the same people all of the time. So make sure you have that teamwork about you. Try and obviously not get too friendly. That was one of my problems, but you want to make sure that you're all trying to achieve the same goal. Number 9, one of my favorite points, and I left it to the end because only those who stay to the end will get this, and that is cheap is expensive. And the reason I say cheap is expensive is because many times I've done this, and it's quite stereotypical that I'm Asian as well. is I've looked for cheap stuff. And when you look for cheap stuff, one of the things you end up doing with cheap stuff is replacing cheap stuff. Now, when you're replacing things, you might not necessarily actually have the cost in front of you, but I promise you that cheap fixes and cheap materials and cheap paint and woodwork and all of that sort of stuff will mount up. You'll just be going back and retrofitting. And one of the problems with that is it's not just the materials that you got to pay for the next time. You've also got to pay for the labor again. So I always say, if you have the budget and you can just stretch it ever so slightly, especially in your first new projects, do it. Because your first new projects, as good as you may think you are, and as many of these videos you watch, you're still going to get the figures wrong. You're still going to get the timelines wrong. Things still go wrong. And this is one of the things I say with training courses. It's very, well, it's almost impossible to know exactly how to manage something just by reading a textbook or going on a course. This stuff can hopefully give you some ways to save some money, but the real problems and the solutions that you need to find are only going to happen in the actual deal itself. And finally, number 10, incentivize. Now this is a very, very important point, especially when you're starting out and you lack experience. Incentivizing builders can really, really help keep them on their toes. If you incentivize them, for example, and say, well guys, if you can finish on the day that you guys said, remember, be flexible with them. Don't try and give them too many rules. If you say to those tradesmen, if you can deliver on the day that you said within the budget that you've agreed to do it for, then I'll tell you what, I'll give you a little bit extra. Or on the flip side, you can say, guys, that's absolutely fine. I really, really appreciate that. It works within the budget, but if it goes over, there might be some penalties to pay. And sometimes this keeps people on their toes, because the last thing you want to do is, once they've had 80 to 90% of their money, builders are then looking for their next job, because obviously they rely on jobs. Now at this point, if you don't have another job to fill them in with, they're going to be looking elsewhere. And if that person who's just taken them on needs the job done now, you bet your top dollar they're going to be rushing to finish your work. So you really need to incentivize them that, guys, if you just get it done right and if you do it at the right spec and you don't rush this, maybe you'll get a little bonus. Or if you don't do it to the spec that we said in the expectations, remember point 2 I think it was about the contract, then what we're going to do is we're going to penalize you. And again, this all needs to be in the paperwork. Wow, that was a long video. So hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully you're still with me, and hopefully you're finding all of the videos that I'm trying to do for you guys informative in terms of helping you move forward. Again, like I always say, I don't need nothing from you guys other than maybe a comment below or a like if you find it useful. It will obviously help the channel out and hopefully help more people learn about property without having to pay so much money to course directors. So it'd be great on that note if you drop a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. Trust me, I've probably missed a few here as well, but I'm just trying to keep this for newbies as well. And I'm just trying to think, what would I have liked to know when I first started this game? So until next time, thanks for watching. Now the third one, I think I've mentioned this on some of the other, and just to make sure that the project is a success. Now when you're